Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures, Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Sunny Vanderstar. Today's topic is Back in India, exciting safari highlights of the season. And it will be presented by our fabulous expedition leader, Aditya Panda. So nice to see you again, Aditya. Thanks for bringing out this presentation. I'll turn it right over to you.
Thank you, Sunny. Hello, everyone. How have you been? It's been a while since I've presented, and if you've been wondering where I have been, well, I've been on safari. After the long COVID break, India opened up earlier this year, and from March onwards, Nat Hab expeditions started resuming in India. And I have been leading trips back to back pretty much since then. And I actually finished my last trip of the season last night. And yeah, there have been some fantastic sightings in all these trips. And I decided to present today's webinar on the highlights of the India season this year. It was a short season, but it was an action-packed season. To the extent that, when I actually decided on presenting on this topic, I was thinking that I would do a season update. So I had actually wanted to include pictures and stories from the 3 trips that I've led this season, all 3 trips. But when I went through my pictures and when I was going through the highlights of my trips, there were so many that it was impossible to include them all in one webinar. So what I'm doing instead is I'll treat this webinar as a part 1, and there will be another part 2 that will have a lot more highlights. So as most of you must be knowing, our tiger trips in India are primarily divided into 2 trips: the Grand India Wildlife Adventure and India Tiger Quest. Of course, there is also a Tiger Photo Pro trip that we have started this year. But this season, I've had a chance to lead 1 Grand India Wildlife Adventure and 2 India Tiger Quest expeditions. And for reasons I just explained, today I'm going to focus on the Grand India Wildlife Adventure, which I led in March. So our trip began, as it does always, in the Bandung National Park as our first wildlife destination. Of course, the trip begins in Delhi, and we spend a day at Delhi, getting to know the city a little, doing a little sightseeing, and getting to know India a little before we move to the wilderness. But I'll start with Bandung. That trip was packed with tiger sightings. Right from our very first game drive, the afternoon we arrived, till almost the very end of the trip, almost every single game drive had a tiger sighting. Actually, each one of them did in central India. The Grand India Wildlife Adventure takes us through 3 top national parks across India over a very large distance. So there is tremendous diversity. We start with the Bandhan National Park in central India, where we spend 3 nights. And then we drive down to the Kanha National Park, also in central India, where we spend 3 nights. And then we travel a long distance over a course of 2 days to get to Kaziranga National Park in Assam, which is in northeastern India. And geographically, that's closer to Southeast Asia than it actually is to central India. Also, in terms of biodiversity, it's closer to Southeast Asia than it is to central India. So tremendous amounts of wildlife on that trip and a lot of diversity. So at Kaziranga also, we spend 3 nights before we head back to Delhi, and then a lot of us choose to go ahead to Agra for a couple of nights to see the Taj Mahal. So yeah, let me start with Bandhavgarh National Park. So as I was mentioning, right from our first game drive, we started having fantastic tiger viewing. But of all the tiger sightings that we had at Bandhavgarh, one particular afternoon is, one that I would like to talk about today. I'm sorry I keep saying tonight because I'm in another time zone. So that afternoon, we were in the Magdi zone of the park, also referred to as Zone 2. And we had driven for a short while, when we came across these two tiger cubs. Well, they're almost grown up. They're about 15 months old. They'll be considered as adults when they're about 2 years old. And these two were sisters. They were siblings. And they are cubs of a tigress known as Dottie. So we came across Dottie's cubs, 2 out of 3 of them. The third one must have been lying somewhere around. We had reason to believe that even the mother was somewhere around. Maybe they had a kill, because of which they were localized in that area for a couple of days, and because of which they did not seem to be in a hurry to go anywhere. So they had fed well, and they were just resting in the afternoon. So we decided to park our Jeep, turn off the engine, and just wait and watch. And sure enough, as the afternoon cooled down, the cubs started becoming more active. When we first arrived, they had been lying down, sleeping sometimes, resting sometimes, getting up and just laying down and looking up sometimes. And as it started to cool down and the sun started to go down, the cubs got more active. Now, of course, from their bellies, we could tell that they had fed well. So they were in a very content state of mind. And they got into this grassland next to us, giving us some brilliant opportunities to take some photographs with the sun setting behind them. This one is one of my favorites. I managed to get a cub looking out of the grass and the sun, the setting sun behind it. But we also got some nice pictures in the twilight. These are just brilliant opportunities to get amazing pictures, the golden hour of the day. That is a cub against the sunset again. I just love photographing and watching tigers in tall grasses. There's just something about it that makes them look so stunning. So, the first cub got, active and started going into the grass, and then she was followed by the second one. And soon they started playing. They had fed well, they had rested well, and the day had begun to cool down, so the temperature was just perfect, and they decided to play. And we were sitting in the grass, parked in our Jeeps, and sometimes we could see them racing around, chasing each other, and sometimes we couldn't even see them. We could just hear the grass sort of swishing as they raced around inside it, because the grass was quite tall, as you can see, and there were patches where the tigers were completely hidden in the grass. And this was the beginning of summer, so the grass had already dried. And as the cubs ran through the grass, as they raced around, it made this amazing swishing noise where you could tell by the sound of it that the tigers, you could tell where the tigers were by the sound of it, but sometimes you couldn't see them. But when you did see them, they presented some brilliant photo opportunities. And this was my favorite series. I mean, you don't get pictures like this every day. The cubs started jumping on each other, leaping in the air, mock fighting. And it was amazing to see that, and even more amazing to photograph that. this, I think, would win the prize among the three photos that I just showed you. Now, tiger cubs need to engage in this sort of play and exercise a lot as they're growing up. It fine-tunes their muscles, it fine-tunes their reflexes, it teaches them all those skills that they need to be able to successfully hunt, to be able to defend their territories against other tigers, and in general, the skills that they need to be real grown-up tigers in the big bad world of the jungle. Of course, as the cubs grow, when they're about 2 years old or so, these play fights begin to get a little more serious and a little more violent. And then one day, there's one fight where the cubs decide to just keep away from each other, to go their own way, and that's how siblings part in the world of tigers and start their own lives. But not all siblings. As we were watching these cubs, it was a litter of 3 cubs, all female, and there were 2 cubs out and about around us, while the third one was probably asleep near mother somewhere in the dense jungle close to the kill, or both of them were probably still feeding. But out of the blue arrives this male tiger, and he looks every bit a grown-up big male tiger. And when this tiger arrived, we knew for sure that it wasn't the father of the cubs, because we know the father of the cubs, and he didn't look like that tiger. So at first we were a little apprehensive, thinking it was an invading male or a competing male that was probably taking over the territory of the father of these cubs. And for a moment we were terrified that this male would harm the cubs. But turns out that this big male tiger, or at least he looked like that, was in fact not fully grown up yet. I mean, he was the size of an adult male tiger, he was the age of a young adult male tiger, but he hadn't become completely independent yet. And he was a half brother from the previous litter. And most tigers his age would be looking for new territory. They would be kicked out by their fathers and other adult males from the area, and they would be working on building their own strength and their own experience, so that they could soon become the dominant male tiger of an area with lots of prey and lots of tigresses, so that they could start their career as a tiger in his prime. But this tiger seemed to be a late bloomer, or maybe he had different ideas. He turns out had figured out a very easy way of making do without conflict, without violence. At the stage when these pictures were taken, he had not left his natal area yet. He had not left the territory where he was born, and he managed to do that by simply following a path of non-violence. He would not spray mark. He would not mark his territory anywhere. He would just roam around, try and get free meals from his mother, which is why he was probably in the area, because he probably knew that his mother and his half-sisters had a kill somewhere. And I was told by the trackers and the guides at Bandung that whenever they saw this tiger happening to come in contact with other male tigers, with other adult males, instead of there being a confrontation, he would simply submit himself. He would just roll over and surrender and expose his belly, and the male tiger in whose area he happened to be would be absolutely at a loss to understand what to do, because here's a male tiger that instead of putting up a fight is completely surrendering, and the dominant male of the area would just sniff and probably with an expression of disgust just leave. So that was a very interesting tiger sighting and very interesting tiger behavior that we got to see. And of course, after posing against the sunset for us, he joined his sisters in the grassland and started playing with them. I have seen this happen once or twice in the past, and it is known that some young male tigers do resort to this strategy in life. But obviously, in due course of time, he's going to realize that he's a tiger and that a tiger needs a territory. And at that point in time, he will grow out of this and do what tigers do, which is to go fight, own territory, hunt, live, mate, and father a lot of cubs. There was another really fascinating experience that we had at Bandung. Now you see, India has a lot of Asian elephants. We have a good population of them. The vast majority of the global Asian elephant population, I think about 70%, live in India. But they are primarily found in southern India, in parts of eastern India and northeastern India, and also in some forests like Corbett in the foothills of the Himalaya. Now, of course, they were far more widespread earlier, and central India used to have elephants, maybe a century or two ago. There isn't very sort of convincing data about it, but we know for a fact that they did exist in central India, and they existed there until about 100 years ago to about 300 years ago. But it's known for sure that in the past 100 years, there haven't been any elephants in central India. They were probably hunted out of existence and certainly captured a lot, because back in the until the 18th century or so, even into the 19th century, there used to be a lot of elephant capture, because the armies of ancient and medieval India had large elephant cavalries that they would use for war. And for that reason, they would catch entire herds of wild elephants to domesticate them and train them. And that is considered to be one of the key reasons why elephants probably went extinct in central India at least a century ago. But about 3 years ago, I think a year before COVID or 2 years before COVID, out of the blue, a herd of elephants, I think the first herd that arrived was about 18 animals. They arrived from eastern central India and somehow found their way to Bandung National Park. I know our Nat Hab trips were affected a little bit, because whenever we were there at the park, in whichever zone the elephants happened to be, game drives would be stopped in those zones and we'd be moved to other zones. Because these elephants had fled conflict with humans and destruction of habitat in eastern India, and they had just wandered off in search of safer pastures, and they found Bandung. Of course, the circumstances under which they arrived, they were not very fond of people, and they did not like jeeps. Besides, The drivers and guides in Bandhavgarh were not experienced with elephants. They'd never seen them in the wild before. So for a few years, the park management began to shut off whichever zone the elephants were at. And of late, they have stopped doing that. Also, in the meantime, more herds have arrived and the elephants have bred, and their numbers have now increased to over 70. But because of the 2-year break from COVID, and because of the way in which the park was being managed from an elephant point of view in the past, I had never had a chance to see these elephants at Bandhavgarh. And on this trip, we did. We had an early morning tiger sighting that day. We were in zone 1 of the park, which is called the Tala zone. And after that tiger sighting, we decided to drive onwards to a beautiful meadow that is a great place to watch vultures. And just as we were arriving at that meadow, it was just the 2 Nat Hab jeeps. There were no other jeeps around. Just as we were arriving at the meadow, we came across this young tusker who seemed to be by himself. That's unusual for an elephant this age. He looked like he must have been around 14 or 15 years old, which is just slightly earlier than the age at which they are, moved away from their herds. So we presume that the rest of the herd must be somewhere close by. But this gentleman, full of curiosity, yet full of fear, and also a little bit of anger, maybe. He was an absolute treat to watch that morning. He was at the same time aggressive and curious, and also a little bit terrified, maybe. This is how we first saw him. He was about to cross the road when one of our jeeps happened to be there, and the 2 were really close to each other, and there was a lot of trumpeting before the elephant sort of moved away a little bit and watched us from a slightly more comfortable distance. Then he put up quite a show of strength, but fortunately, despite the fact that the local park guide and the driver were not very experienced with elephants, I fortunately and my colleague Raju here, who you can see at the wheel of our second jeep, are quite well experienced with elephants. So we saw a few other jeeps from the park coming, seeing the elephant turning around and driving away, while we decided to stay and enjoy this sight. And I made a little video that I posted on Instagram that I thought you might enjoy. So you see how he's shaking his head first, in a show of strength, but at the same time he also lifts his trunk up repeatedly to sniff at us and sort of gauge us. He did take a dust bath in front of us, just trying to build his own courage up, and yet sending us a strong message not to mess with it. We didn't mess with it, but it was absolutely brilliant to see elephants in this backdrop of the central India forest. And it's so amazing that for whatever reasons, a species is back in its habitat after such a long gap, all by itself without any, artificial wildlife management. And of course, in Bandhavgarh, we saw a lot of the other animals, of which I really like this picture of spotted deer stag that I decided to throw in to today's webinar. After Bandhavgarh, we drove to Kanha National Park. It's a 5-hour drive from Bandhavgarh, a very steep drive, I must say. And one of the amazing things about Kanha, one of the many amazing things about Kanha is that no matter what time of the year they're at, even in the peak of summer, it's only the middle of the day that gets hot. The mornings in Kanha are always, they're magical. There's almost always mist, and the temperature is just perfect. And Kanha is a slightly more moist area compared to Bandhavgarh, and the trees grow taller, and the forest is incredibly beautiful. Kanha is the home of the hard-ground swamp deer, a species that had gone nearly extinct in the 1960s. In fact, there were only 60 or so animals left in the 1960s. And, once upon a time, these swamp deer were found all across central India, well into eastern India. But, they're habitat specialists. And the bad thing about specialists is that they do not take well to change. So when these grasslands that the swamp deer required were taken over by agriculture and human habitation, their numbers began to decline. They were also poached, of course, they were hunted until about 60 animals were left in Kanha. And, Kanha National Park is one of India's oldest national parks and one of the areas where wildlife management took its roots in this country. And Kanha has always had a phenomenal reputation for being, one of the best managed reserves in India. So in the 60s and 70s, the park management took steps to protect the last of the Barasinga, and they secured habitat. They incentivized voluntary relocation of villages to restore meadows back from farmland, and they drove the last 60 Barasinga into a massive enclosure because at that point in time, even tiger predation was a threat to the existence of the species. So they were herded into a predator-proof enclosure where a conservation breeding program was initiated, and then they were released back into the grasslands again. Today, there are about 800 of these swamp deer, the hard-ground swamp deer in Kanha National Park, and a second population has been established in another national park called Satpura, and a third population will soon be re-established at Bandhavgarh, which is where we were before. They're called the Barasinga because the stags, when the mature stags can have 12 or more tines on their antlers. Bara means 12 in Hindi, and Singa means horned. Of course, these two stags here do not have 12 tines. They're younger. I see they have about 8 tines. But as they mature, as their antlers grow, they will have more tines. I have counted up to 22 tines on one really mature stag. Kanha has these amazing meadows, very large meadows, which sustain phenomenal densities of prey species such as spotted deer and of course the Barasinga, which is what makes it one of the finest tiger habitats in the world. The time of the year we were there at is a very interesting time to be there. Spring and early summer are the time when forests in tropical India are full of flowers. The trees shed their leaves and they come into flower and fruit. And this here is a mahua tree, which is a very, very highly prized tree in central India. The tree, there's an old Gond saying. The Gond are one of the key indigenous tribes that inhabit the area. There is an old Gond saying that heaven is a place full of mahua trees and hell is a place where there are no mahua trees. And the mahua tree comes into flower around this time of the year, around March, April, depending upon the local temperatures in the local area, of course. And these flowers are, they're rich in nectar. They're very rich in a sugary nectar, and they have a nutty sort of smell that you would either love or hate. I think it smells very nice. It can be a strong smell for some people, but it smells really, really nice. And the petals of the flower are sort of compounded together, giving it the appearance of a grape-like fruit. And these flowers keep dropping to the ground, throughout the late spring, early summer period, and all kinds of animals gather around the trees to feed on them. People also collect the flowers and they distill it into a very, very smooth drink, also called mahua. So those of you who happen to be on a Grand India wildlife adventure should definitely try some mahua, at the lodges you stay at. I make a pretty neat mahua martini in case you happen to travel with me at that time of the year. Of course, we saw tigers at Kanha too. You see, in this 2-year gap that we had because of COVID, it became a little difficult to keep track of all the tigers for people like me. Of course, I made a few personal trips to Kanha on my own during these 2 years because I am just in love with this place and I can't stay away from it for too long. But even then, I found tigers that I think I hadn't seen earlier. A lot of things had changed. A lot of the old dominant males were gone. A lot of tigresses had new litters and new cubs. A lot of new young males in their prime have started taking over the areas of the males that we were more familiar with earlier. And on this trip, we saw this young tiger, handsome young male called DB5. I'm sorry, this is DJ5. DB5 is another tiger. I realized as we were watching this tiger that I had last seen him when he was a cub on a Nat Hab Grand India Wildlife Adventure trip before COVID. So this picture was taken, I think, in 2019. It's amazing that we saw one of these cubs. I can't pinpoint exactly which cub of these 3 it is, but this young tiger was one of these cubs, and it was great to see that he had survived and he was doing well. And especially for a male tiger, for a young male tiger, the chances of survival are not so great. But what was even more exciting and even more heartening, especially for me personally, was to know that, a male offspring, a cub of this tiger, a tiger that I was really fond of and who is now no more, a tiger called Link 7. You know, one of his cubs, looking very similar to him, has survived. So it's amazing. He's inherited his father's boldness. You know, Link 7 was a very bold tiger. He never cared about how many jeeps there were around him. He was a very, very confident tiger. He was a showman. And it's amazing that one of his sons has survived. And that was Link 7's last litter before he went missing and was presumed dead. So it's amazing that one of his cubs has survived and reached adulthood and is very likely going to be another safari superstar in the years to come. And of course, we saw many more tigers in Kanha. Again, on each and every game drive, we had a tiger sighting at Kanha. And after our time at Central India, after our time in Bandhavgarh and Kanha, we headed to Kaziranga. And that is how our first wildlife experience at Kaziranga begins. On our first game drive, or even before our first game drive, we enjoyed this amazing way of watching wildlife from elephant back. These elephants are owned by the forest department. They're not privately owned. They serve two purposes. Their primary purpose is to patrol the park. You know, Kaziranga is extremely hostile territory for a human to be patrolling on foot. And it is also not suitable to patrol it entirely by jeep, because a lot of parts of Kaziranga are inaccessible by jeep. And the best way to patrol it, therefore, is on elephant back. And therefore, the forest department maintains a large cadre of domestic elephants that are not wild caught, may I add. They're captive bred, just like horses or service dogs. These elephants serve the forest department and help it in protecting wildlife habitat. But there is also the opportunity to go on the backs of these elephants into the tall grass, into the grasslands of Kaziranga, and look for its amazing wildlife. Mainly the greater one-horned rhinoceros. And we saw two of them, and from really close. And what was a lot of fun in Kaziranga this time was that a lot of the rhinos that we saw had really young calves almost at the same time. You know, it's just chance probably that they had them about around the same time, because rhinos do not have a fixed breeding season. They breed throughout the year. But we saw at least 3 or 4 different rhinos with calves that were just, you know, 2 or 3 days old. So it was beautiful to watch them. And here are 2 young male rhinos just having a mock fight. We also had some brilliant elephant sightings in Kaziranga. This handsome tusker was seen by us. You know, it was raining most of the time while we were at Kaziranga. So, you know, we had a chance to photograph this beautiful elephant in a nice drizzle. And we saw him very close to a watchtower. So it was actually possible for me and for some of our guests who were keen on photography to get down from the vehicle, lie down on the ground and shoot the elephant from a really low ground level perspective, which always gets amazing pictures of large animals that you would like to, you know, look imposing in pictures. So this elephant almost looked like he was walking in water. Of course, he wasn't. He was in very shallow water. And he gave us some really nice photographs. But what was most fun was that we had a glimpse. Some of us did, most of us couldn't, but some of us had a very short and a very distant glimpse of a really, really unique tiger. It's the only tiger of its kind known to exist in the wild, and it's called the Tabby Tiger or an orange tiger, or as I prefer, a golden tiger. This tiger in Kaziranga, as I said, is the only one of its kind, and her stripes are so light. They're almost a light brown color, and from a distance, it's almost not possible to see those stripes. So she looks absolutely golden. Of course, this video that I'm about to show you wasn't taken by anybody in our group, although I would have loved it if that had been the case. It had been taken by a local guide, and it's gone viral afterwards. And I wanted to show you this video just so that you would get an idea of what this tiger looks like. When we saw it in Kaziranga, which is a place where tiger sightings, as it is, are very rare, she was really, really far, and the light wasn't great, so I didn't get any good pictures. But I hope you'll enjoy this video. Hope you enjoyed that. And with that, I would like to end today's webinar, and I'd like to hear all the questions that you have. But before that, let me remind you that India is open. If you're interested to come to India on any of the Nat Hab trips, be it the Grand India Wildlife Adventure, India Tiger Quest, or the Tiger Photo Pro trip, or our snow leopard trips, please find the contact information below this slide and get in touch with Nat Hab. Now, I'd love to hear what questions you have.
Thank you so much, Aditya. The pictures are amazing. One of the first questions that has come up so many times is, what lenses are you using? Is there any way to encapsulate what your gear is for these shots?
Well, my gear is very modest. I use a Nikon D500 body, a Nikon 70-200 2.8 lens, and which I call my elephant lens. And it's a great lens for tigers too, especially when they're close. And my workhorse is a Nikon 200-500 5.6. So it's all adequate equipment. It's not the best in the world, but as they say, the gear doesn't matter. What you see and what you shoot really matters.
Well, clearly you know how to use it. So we've lots of questions, but if anyone wants to add another question, feel free to submit your questions via the questions field in the control panel. So going back to sort of the beginning of your presentation, talking about how incredible the sightings have been, do you have a sense that it's because humans haven't been around for a while? Do you see them choosing to take the roads more often because there haven't been as many humans, or they just haven't been disturbed in a while? Or what's your intuition say about why the sightings have been so fantastic recently?
Well, it's not that tourism stopped because of COVID. International tourism did stop, but a lot of domestic tourism continued to happen. In fact, more domestic wildlife tourism happened than ever before, because not only did you have your regular wildlife tourists from within India who continue to visit the national parks, but also a lot of people who would have otherwise traveled abroad on vacation couldn't do so, and they decided to visit the national parks as well. So the national parks were quite full of tourists all this while. The animals are quite used to the vehicles, so they don't really feel disturbed by the presence of tourism. And also, wildlife tourism is extremely well managed in India's national parks, especially our central Indian national parks, which sort of really are a gold standard in how game drives are disciplined. So the animals are not really disturbed by that. I think the sightings have improved because a lot of tigresses at the moment are having cubs, and that wave of sightings is sort of going to continue for the next 2 years at least, because that's how long cubs take to grow up. And also the time of the year at which we were visiting, which was towards the beginning of the dry season, towards the beginning of the hot season, that really helps with good tiger sightings.
Interesting. So you said you just got back from safari. How is the
24
excessive what was your experience? How is the excessive heat affecting the tigers?
Well, it affected us as well, if I may add. And we survived on a lot of lemonade bottles in our ice boxes. The tigers were mostly close to water. We did find tigers being active in the early parts of the morning till about 9 o'clock or so. After that, they would find some shade or find an area near water and just settle in for the day. And when we used to come back in the afternoon, after our lunch, we would still always find them near water. But again, as the sun went down, as it got cooler later in the afternoon, in the early part of the evening, the tigers would get active again. So thanks to the park management, there is no shortage of water in the parks. They have done a good job of maintaining artificial water holes to make sure the animals don't have to leave the safety of the park in search of water in this extreme heat. And all the tigers were, we found them near water, and they were well hydrated and well rested in this heat.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
Is there a purpose for the white patch on the back of the tiger's ears that you're aware of?
Well, you can speculate. There has been much speculation about it. No one knows for sure, of course. All of them tend to have it. There are many theories, one of which is that it helps the cubs follow their mother through tall grass and thick bushes. Another theory is that when tigers are fighting or defending themselves and they flatten their ears, those white spots look like two large, extra pair of eyes. But all of this is speculation. Nobody knows the answer to that question, really.
Moving on to the elephants. Are the new arrivals habituated to humans, or have you ever seen any of them get spooked?
Well, they are still getting spooked, but they are a lot less aggressive and a lot less scared than they used to be earlier. In fact, today somebody had posted a video on Instagram of an entire herd of elephants going to the water at Bandung. They will, I think, in due course of time, become calmer around humans and calmer around jeeps, and become much more habituated.
Let's see here. So you talked about a surplus of population of tigers. If there's a surplus, do they get move to different parks, or what happens?
No, you see, these parks are all natural habitats. They're part of larger landscapes. They're part of larger tiger landscapes. So when there is a lot of breeding inside a national park, and inside a national park which is already saturated with tigers, the younger tigers, when it's time for them to move on and lead their own lives, they spill out of these parks, and through corridors, they find their way to other parks, to other national parks, to other tiger populations. Of course, that is not to say that our corridors are not threatened, or that every reserve is well connected in that sense. But that is what naturally happens. And of course, there are challenges to that. There are threats. Sometimes tigers have to go through human habitation. A lot of times they get into human-tiger conflict. So, those are really broad topics that I could get into, and that would be the story of another webinar.
Sounds good. So I think we have time for maybe one more question, or a couple part question about the golden tigers, or the golden tiger. Is that tiger accepted into the rest of the tiger population, so to speak? And the light stripes, does it give it an advantage or disadvantage that you've noticed? Or
well, she's been camera trapped with other tigers, so clearly tigers do not discriminate, upon appearance. And I don't think the stripes or the lack of them makes much of a difference to how well camouflaged she can be, because she still got tawny golden brown color. Some of you must have noticed that she sometimes even looks like a lioness, except for those huge white patches on her face and her very obviously larger size. But any neutral color will help a predator blend in and camouflage itself and be able to hunt.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Well, I want to turn it over to you in case you have some closing comments.
Thank you, everyone. It was great presenting after a gap today, and I look forward to seeing you soon on another Daily Dose of Nature webinar. And on that one, I'll be talking to you about the amazing tiger sightings and other wildlife sightings we've had on the India Tiger Quest expedition, one of which I finished yesterday. And I can't wait to talk to you about all these exciting sightings we have had on those soon.
Thank you again, Aditya. And it's so fun to see these images that are so fresh and so current, and hear the stories and feel the passion in your voice. So thanks again for bringing us this fabulous presentation. I want to thank everybody who tuned in. Please join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.